Good afternoon. I'm Diane Sayre, and I have with me Representative Andrea Boland of Maine. And I was representing Executive Intelligence Review just recently at the National Caucus of State Legislators Conference, where there was a somewhat spectacular debate about Glass-Steagall, which I must say I found a little amazing because all of the speakers tried to say how irrelevant it was, but if it was so irrelevant, I'm not exactly sure why they had such a very large contingent of Wall Street bankers there to lobby against it. So what I would ask you to do is to give people a sense of what actually happened, and if you could perhaps begin with your opening remarks, which I thought were very clear and straightforward and really not that provocative.
Well, of course, in the first instance, I was presenting a resolution to this National Conference of State Legislatures, which is the largest organization of state legislatures in the country. And this was one of the smaller forum in the winter. There's a bigger one in the summer, and we've been there and we'll be there again. So I was bringing this resolution asking for the NCSL to support legislation at the congressional level to bring back the provisions of Glass-Steagall, such as Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative
McCain?
We got to stop this. This is not good.
They can edit it out.
What's her?
Marcy Kaptur.
Kaptur. I couldn't get past the M's.
That's fine. Just continue. They'll edit.
Okay. Marcy Kaptur, Tom Harkin also have those pieces of legislation. A number of states across the country, as you know, have introduced
25
resolutions to return to Glass-Steagall, as has Maine, and it passed unanimously in the House and the Senate in Maine. So I was there to ask the NCSL to do the same thing as a group to support the return to Glass-Steagall, and essentially separate the functions of the commercial banks from investments and speculations of the sort that has troubled Wall Street and the population as a whole. I know the reality of life in the State House with legislators and lobbyists around all the time, that the bankers' associations are very active and very strong, very powerful, and customarily very polite. But I wanted to open with the fact to encourage those who were not really entwined so much with that kind of a goings-on, I guess you'd say, in their average life. I wanted to let them distinguish themselves from others that were there, who play along with lobbying and influence and that sort of thing. So I opened by saying that I understand that those of you who are present here who really need to raise a lot of money regularly and have concerns about raising a lot of money may find it hard to support this resolution because, as we understand, the Bankers Association is a very powerful lobby and they can make a difference. They took a great deal of offense at opening with that, which I found out afterwards. But my point was to acknowledge a reality and not to point to anyone in particular. And I went on to read from the recent Wall Street Journal articles about Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, Citibank, everyone, and they're worried about student loans, all sorts of things, resulting from mismanagement, illegal behavior of the banks. And in all these cases, the banks are admitting their culpability and agreeing to pay billions and billions of dollars. So there's nothing about it that's a secret.
Right.
And so just to answer your question, that's how I opened to just give recognition of what we see in the newspapers and what we all know.
Right, and the rest of your testimony, which dealt with your history in the mortgage examining or something that you went through, I thought this was really important because you made a point to them that the people that you represent in Maine are not interested in having their savings accounts used for speculative purposes by the banks.
Oh, that's right. That's right, of course. And they've seen the results of this sort of thing. It's done terrible damage to our economy. And the way things are now, it stands to do a whole lot more if we don't do something to stop it. But yes, I represent average people in Maine, and their concerns are about maintaining their mortgages, getting new mortgages for homes, businesses wanting to expand and get funding, economic development interests that are trying to improve infrastructure that are all having a hard time getting loans in the face of the banks that we keep on supporting to the tune of $85 billion a month, continuing to increase their investment in speculative things like derivatives. So I just wanted to let the people know that I'm just here to represent the best interests of the people of my district and the people of Maine. And in so doing, I also described how I'm also a real estate title examiner, so that anybody who is buying a piece of property, real estate, and needs to take out a mortgage loan on it, needs to have this title examination done. I've been doing it for a long time. I go way back. I started in Boston. But, and how it always was that we did a title search for a law firm. The lawyer representing the law firm signed a certificate of authenticity, backing that up, put their names on it, they stood behind it, that this is good, this is a good title, no problems with it, nobody has a big lien, there's nobody in the background that has an interest in the property. All of that used to be very important, that we got it right, because we're working for the bank, we're representing the bank doesn't want anything to go wrong, everyone's on the line, let's get it right. That was the most important thing. And over time, those standards seemed to loosen up a little bit. And so then they went, much like this banking situation has, to title insurance. So then we can step away from our liability, just tell them to buy title insurance. And of course, both the buyer is paying both for the title examination then and for the insurance to ensure that the bank's interests are taken care of, not their own.
Right.
So just seeing that process, I wasn't happy about that. But also what we recognized at some point a ways back, that they were loaning out very large sums of money for pieces of property that we were asking, well, how could they be loaning that much money on this property? Time and again, you'd notice it. And also the title searches needed to be done very quickly. That was the goal. Not so much quality, but fast. And then we started to understand that the reason for that is that they were selling it to the secondary mortgage market. So now, later on, I start to look back and see that I was looking at the very beginnings of what has become such a huge phenomenon today, which is things like mortgages were being sold and sold again and sold again and sold again and put into groupings and resold, and everyone's speculating on what the interest might be that was paid to them, and then offering insurance to cover that we don't lose, and actually setting it up so they did lose. It's just gotten to be so complex that nobody's really being treated fairly. And as was pointed out to me in a graph that I was looking at, the global GDP is $70 trillion, which to me sounds like a pretty big number. But the amount of money that is out there in derivatives is $770 trillion. And I just picture just this huge tower of debt resting on average mortgages, average car loans, various other instruments that are there to support something real in the community. And and anyway, I brought that up to illustrate how I was there seeing the beginnings of this phenomenon, and now to see that it's gone so far. It used to be interesting when somebody was going to then sell a property that had been in that period of selling and reselling and reselling. The law firms then, trying to arrange the closing, couldn't find who really owned the mortgage at that point. It would take them a day or two to try to track it down because it had changed hands so many times, and it was not really very transparent.
No, and you described this 70 trillion versus the 770 trillion in your testimony as a house of cards.
Yes.
Ready to go. And then your final point was that there would be some pain, if you want to elaborate this.
Well, that's right. And it was interesting because before I went in to present this resolution, some of the big banks met me out in the lobby and were rather heavy-handed, trying to intimidate me into not bringing this forward and withdrawing it. And, they said, well, you're going on to a national stage now. Are you sure you want to be there without talking with us first? You should have spoken with us first. You could have given us a call. And I said, well, you could have given me a call if you were interested in talking to me. You are a public yeah, right. You can find me pretty easily.
Right.
Well, we didn't know, but and they said, this was Bank of America now speaking. We have, I think it was 13,000 employees working for our banks in Maine, and their jobs will all be impacted this way. And I was very doubtful of that because, of course, we're trying to make the banks safer.
In speculation.
Right.
I mean, some of them have to be real bankers.
Well, that's true. That's true. And is their institution so fragile that it cannot stand alone?
Right.
That it's so dependent on all the speculation that
that's a good question.
It can't stand.
Right.
That was pretty sad. But in the whole scheme of things, I certainly don't want to lose jobs for Maine people. Obviously, we don't need that. But there's no sense in making their jobs more and more precarious by continuing going down this road. And he pointed out to me how there were actually 8 employees in my town of Sanford. And I said, goodness. We have a population. It's not a big city, but we've got a population of 23,000. So that's not a huge chunk of the population. But certainly, that was the route they went in trying to intimidate me.
So that's why you made the point that Wall Street will feel some pain.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got away from your question. Yes, so another thing they said is we are very concerned about this. We are very concerned. As if to say, do I know what I'm talking about? And I said to them, well, you should be concerned. That's proper. You have every reason to be concerned because there is going to be some pain involved in this for you. And they said, well, there could be pain involved for you, too. It could impact your career.
Wow, they were
and they were, but so I just wanted to bring that out, that they're not being very nice.
Right.
Or very professional.
Right.
And so you need to wonder about their arguments when they're so desperate to be making threats like that to an average legislator.
Right. Yeah, so I thought that was very strong what you said, because you said that the people who will feel some pain are those who wish to impose great pain on everybody else. And that was the way that you formulated it. And so you made your case. And then I think the first person to speak was the Senator Travis Holdman from Indiana, who got up, and I just have to say, as an observer, I was surprised because he tried to come across as calm, but you could see that there might have been a little bit of smoke coming out of his ears. And he said, first of all, that he took exception to your comments, which were exactly as you said here, very not even accusative of anyone in the room. You just said as a generality that for people who are worried about elections and have to raise a lot of money, it may be difficult for you to support Glass-Steagall because you had yourself experienced the heavy-handed tactics of these bankers.
That's right.
And he said, how dare you impugn my character, and if we were in Indiana, you would be censured before we went any farther on hearing this, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and then do you want to describe the rest of what he had to say?
Well, yes, he took exception to have it suggested that he possibly could be somebody that that should be offended by what I was saying, and that how unkind of me to do that. But then he went on to read in his arguments against my resolution, word for word, what the Bankers Association letter had sent to all the NCSL members.
Yes, that's quite a thing for a person who claims to be so offended that you might say they were associated with the Banking Association if they voted against Glass-Steagall.
Right,
and
right.
He reads the letter from the American Bankers Association.
Right, right. Word for word. And it was really kind of funny because everybody in the room had gotten the letter,
right.
So they knew what he was doing.
Right.
Yeah, and including me. It was really amazing that he didn't have any more thoughts of his own than just that he was offended, and now he's going to read to us what the bankers said about this whole deal.
Right.
So.
Right. Yes, and then the next person who got up was from Utah, who said, I want to echo his point of order on how offensive you had been. And then he said this very peculiar formulation, that just as everyone who supports Glass-Steagall is not necessarily with LaRouche PAC, everyone who opposes Glass-Steagall is not necessarily with the American Bankers Association.
Yeah, so that was kind of strange. Really, what he wanted to do is this thing about association with LaRouche that has some sort of, it's grown some legs about being a very strange kind of an outfit to be working with. Mm-hmm. And I really take offense at that because as a legislator, I have found so much good information from various sources that a lot of people wouldn't look at or hear from. If somebody's doing the work and doing the research, I'm interested in reading about it, and from different sources. And of course, I'd had the personal experience of seeing this whole thing develop, and I've experienced the frustration of people in Maine with the condition of the banks and Wall Street.
Right.
I mean, it was all rather absurd. I'm not opposed to people associating with the banks if they're doing good work at the banks and supporting good work in the banks.
Right. Well,
I just know that they have an overpowering
Sure.
effect on elections.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, well, we saw that in the Congress where at the last election, I believe the bank lobbyists expended over $330 million
Wow, I didn't know
to
that.
ensure that Glass-Steagall would not come up. And they were quite certain that they had it under control in the Senate. And then not only do you have one, but you have two bills in the U.S. Senate in support of Glass-Steagall, Elizabeth Warren's and Tom Harkin's.
Yes.
So I think part of their hysteria may be that they're fighting a losing battle right now because...
Well, as my mother always used to say to me, the truth hurts. And they're having to face the truth of that. And they don't like it. One other thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and I don't remember which person brought it up, because there were two or three that had negative remarks to make. But he was complaining about how this sort of thing is popping up all over the country, wanting to bring Glass-Steagall back. And I thought, well, if you could hear what you're saying, you're telling people that nationwide people are asking for a return to Glass-Steagall, as evidence of various legislatures who have passed
Right.
resolutions to bring back that sort of thing. It's just so simple. It really is so simple. People, they know what is speculation and what is investment, and they know what is secure, conservative care of their money. They want them to be separate. If they put the money in the bank, they want it doing what they understand banks do. You
Right.
know, lend to banks, individuals, support the town, and immediately they're going to the bank, taking out a mortgage, and 2 days later it's someplace in Iowa or what have you, and moving fast.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense to anyone I've spoken to on the street. Oh, of course that should be separated.
Right, of course. Well, that's why I found it so unusual. And I think it was the representative from Utah who presented this letter, which I think is quite unusual. State of Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, George Gervais, Commissioner, on behalf of Governor LePage, saying, "Gentlemen, on behalf of Governor Paul LePage, I am urging the National Council of State Legislators," isn't it conference?
Conference of
Yes,
state
a
legislatures.
council of state legislators to oppose passage of the proposed resolution concerning regulation of commercial and investment banking that will be considered at your fall forum. This is a terribly misplaced effort. And it goes on with the same lines of the ABA. What was your reaction upon hearing this?
Well, it was a certain degree of amusement,
Mm-hmm.
a certain degree of outrage, you might say, of the executive branch reaching into the legislative branch's affairs. And certainly it was unfriendly to be coming from a distance
Yes.
to reach in to Washington from Maine. But also it was flattering that they see it as that important
Mm-hmm.
that they need to comment on it.
Right.
But they also are political animals. The governor's running for re-election. Nobody who needs to run for re-election wants to have any big behemoth kind of a lobbying group working against them.
Right.
And that's a reality. I kind of feel sorry for people because that's what the system is. But you can't help but wonder if that's what's skewing their perception of what makes sense and what doesn't.
Sure.
Because our governor has talked a great deal about caring about average people.
Right. And also, I think it's a little presumptuous given that, as you mentioned, both houses of the legislature supported Glass-Steagall by voice acclamation. It was virtually unanimous. And you have Congressman Michoud, Congresswoman Shelley Pingree are both co-sponsors of the bill in the House, and Senator Angus King is a co-sponsor of the bill in the Senate. So, as an outside observer, it certainly looks to me like the state of Maine is actually overwhelmingly in support of Glass-Steagall.
Right. That's really true, and it presents it as if the state is against it. 3 out of 4 of our congressional representatives, and even the fourth, too, Senator Collins,
Mm-hmm.
is interested in making some improvements. We really had a very good meeting with her staff on this issue while we were here in Washington. I think they're kind of surprised to learn some of the information that we had to share.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So certainly it is not the temperament of Maine to say, oh, absolutely take our money, speculate all you want, sell it to some others and have them speculate, have somebody else give insurance on the speculation. Right. That's just what we had in mind for how to use our money.
On the streets, it's fine. We'll be really happy that you were successful.
Right. That big tower of empty card structures is really a pleasure to look at, and it'll be so pretty to see fall. But we really, it's dreadful. It's just dreadful because Maine is a poor state to begin with. It's a beautiful state, but we have very modest incomes generally. And for people to be struggling the way they are today, and all this money that could be going to work on infrastructure and other uses is going out the window in little paper airplanes, I call them.
Right.
It's not right.
No, exactly. And just in closing, I would like, since you referenced Senator Elizabeth Warren, which really gets to the heart of this, to not reinstate Glass-Steagall is a genocidal policy. And Senator Warren and Senator Bernie Sanders actually held hearings a couple weeks ago where they documented the fact that in a number of counties now in the United States, life expectancy is lower than life expectancy in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So what you actually see, and I think anyone knows it who thinks about it, is that there is a direct correlation between poverty and life expectancy, poverty and infant mortality, so that we're now at the point where you're saying people cannot afford. It's not like people have expendable income to
That's right.
sacrifice to Wall Street speculators. They're barely getting by, if they're getting by, and we're at a point where they can't afford to lose anymore, which is why I think this has become such an urgent issue.
Well, absolutely. It to think that money that could be spent improving businesses, homes, and infrastructure, which our governor always wants to attract business to Maine. Better schools, better roads, people being getting the educations that they needed. That money could be going to support all of that to make life better for everyone. And it's just going nowhere but into the pockets of these highly skilled and nefarious, really, entities, shall we say, that could even have the gall to protest that we're bringing a Glass-Steagall resolution when every day there are headlines showing them admitting to having trespassed on their obligations to the American people and paying so many billions of dollars
Right,
in restitution, partial restitution, I would say.
right,
Yeah.
right. Good. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for
very
bringing
much.
this up. I'm getting angrier as I go now, but I'm so glad, though, and frankly, I'm so glad to acknowledge the work that the LaRouche PAC has done on this effort. And perhaps they're in a special situation where it maybe is a little easier for them to. I don't know. But when we've got two strong political parties, neither one wanting to upset big Wall Street or big bankers when they're trying to get what they think is their important message to the people out, they've become, it appears, paralyzed to act on some of these issues that face these major powerhouses.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.